Hey there, listeners. I am Joanne Lee Cornish, your truth bomb dropper in the world of weight loss, body composition, and mastering the art of rocking the body you've always deserved and dreamed of in midlife and beyond. Let's cut through the noise. Society tells us it's downhill from now on. We're told to embrace the middle-aged weight gain, embrace the muscle loss and poor health. If that's your vibe, then cool. But if you're ready to defy the narrative, then I am your gal. This podcast is a no fluff podcast where we break down the essential truths of body composition, toss around some practical tips, and dissect the latest trends. I'm not here to sugarcoat. I'm here to show you what's not just possible, but downright probable for you. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to click the link in the show notes to explore how we can team up and kick mediocrity to the curb. I offer one-on-one coaching, my ever-popular group coaching programs, and my corporate Educate to Elevate program. Okay, let's get on with the podcast. Enjoy. Genetic editing. We've heard of genetically modified organisms, GMO, but what about genetic editing? Why we should be a little concerned with recent changes. But first, before I start talking about that, a few things going on. Today, I set the dates for the Mastering Midlife program. That is going to be September the 14th through till October the 25th. Midlifemonth.com is the link for that. This is the 6th program in my series. It is the biggest program, and I've decided because every time I do a program, I add more content, things that I've learned over the year, and I add it to the program. So there's a lot of content for this program, and oftentimes people get a little overwhelmed with this program. So I'm actually going to take 5 weeks to do it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 3 weeks of coaching, then take a week off so people can catch up and review the content. And I'm going to do another 2 weeks. So that is going to be better for the participant. And honestly, it's going to be better for me because it becomes a little overwhelming balancing all my different work aspects. So anyway, that is going to come up. I only run it in the live format once a year, September the 14th to October the 25th. Mastering with Life. Things are different. What worked before doesn't work anymore, don't work anymore. We're going to talk about the 6 hormones that change body composition as we age. Obviously, we're going to talk about perimenopause, menopause, and andropause. Guys, this program is for you too. In fact, I really encourage the guys to come in. We're going to talk about exercise changes as we get older. Obviously, there's meal plans and there's workouts to follow. About HRT, TRT, peptides, some of the more up-and-coming biohacks, skin, muscle, you name it, supplements. But it's a big program. Anyway, so that is coming up. Just set the dates. I'm just fine-tuning the websites. But for now, you can go to midlifemonth.com if you would like to join in September. Also, if you go to that link, there's an option to split the payments, which some people like. What else? I have en route the SLU-PP332 supplement that I'm very excited about. And once I have it, I'll do a Zoom on it. It goes very nicely with the other 5-amino 1MQ that I offer. What else? Next week I leave for England. I leave on Tuesday. So I'll try and film some podcasts before I leave, but I'll be over there for a couple of weeks. But let's get back to the subject in hand. So what we're talking about today is genetic editing. And to understand genetic editing, I guess you have to understand GMO. Now, GMO is a topic that I just covered in my Type 28 program. So I don't want to spiel all that. I just want to give you the cliff notes of that. And the cliff notes really are, GMO is pretty recent. The first, it was sugar beets and alfalfa, I think. They were first approved for use in 2011, 2013, I think those the years were. That's not a long time ago. So you go from the introduction of them genetically modified crops to the fact that now those crops, 90% of those crops in the US are genetically modified. That's a little bit scary to me. And so you're talking about the soy, cotton, sugar beet, alfalfa, no wheat. Wheat is just sprayed with bunches up, but it's not GMO. And also animals that have been modified, usually they go to the research labs, but they do use salmon. They increase their growth hormone, make them grow quicker, get them to full size in 18 months instead of 3 years. And it's all very disturbing, honestly. And what disturbs me the most about genetically modified food is it's new. It's relatively new. Banned in Europe, apart from a couple of countries, but basically banned in Europe. So banned in Europe, and yet 90% of some of our crops are genetically modified. That's terrifying. Another few terrifying stats. So what happens with genetically modified? So they go in and they alter the DNA of the plant. By altering the DNA of the plant, the idea is they can change the plant to have more favorable traits. So it can be resistant to climate, so drought, or it can be resistant to pests and insects. So the story goes that if they do that, then the farmer can have a bit bigger crop yield and the price to the consumer goes down. I don't know about you, but I've not seen the price of food go down at all. So I think that argument is null and void. But apparently it started with a good cause, but it's definitely making money for some people. And with regards to the farmers, we know bad weather can ruin their crops. And I see that, however, it is new. And what happens if you change the DNA, so you're changing the pattern of the plant, then the argument would be that does our immune system recognize that plant now? Because it's changed, it's different. And the immune system recognizes protein patterns, not individual proteins. It recognizes protein patterns. So if you change the pattern, the immune system gets a bit confused. And immune response, inflammation is the cornerstone of every disease. So I'm not going to go all into GMO, but this is relatively new. And if we think back to things like the cigarettes, when I was a kid, people smoked, very common. It's always scary to me when I get in an airplane and there's an ashtray, because you just know how old that plane is. And people smoked in offices, they smoked in airplanes, they smoked in people's homes. It was very common. Do you remember there were those fake candy cigarettes? So kids would have these little fake cigarettes and there would be candy to, I mean, gosh, when you think back, my gosh, terrible. Right? And this was when I was a kid. So say in the 70s, they knew from the 1940s that cigarettes caused lung cancer. By the 1970s, there was only a third of doctors who were actually warning against the risks of it. So what I'm saying is we knew something was bad. We embraced it and then we figured out, oh, wow, this isn't really very good for us. And it still took 30 years before people even, after knowing that it was bad, that doctors even started talking about it. And now we know how disastrous it is. And just my thought is, what if it's the same for GMO? What if this is, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. We can grow so many crops and, oh, it's better for you. And it's good for the farmers, all this nonsense. And then we figure out, oh, wow, it's not. And now we've got 90% of the crops, which are GMO. How are you going to reverse that? How are you going to reverse that? And even if they had the information, how long is it going to take before you completely reverse farming practices? So I think that's my biggest argument at all with GMO. Although let me just throw some numbers out at you, which might scare you. So with GMO, it means that the plants can be resistant to pesticides. So the glyphosate by Monsanto Bayer was the start of this, with their Roundup, the brand name for their glyphosate, the herbicide that was sprayed on everything. So now we have these plants where they killed everything. Once they had this glyphosate, they couldn't use much of it because it killed everything. So then it was like, okay, you better create plants that are resistant to this. And so now we can spray them all the time. What happened was plants become resistant to the herbicide sprayed on them. So the weeds and things like that they were trying to kill, they became resistant to the glyphosate. And I say this a lot in my coaching programs, but what we are overexposed to, we become resistant to. I'll say it again. What we are overexposed to, we become resistant to. If you think about insulin, when we are overexposed to insulin because there's too much of it, the body becomes resistant to it, insulin resistant. The body doesn't recognize the message of insulin anymore. The same can go for leptin. The same can go for so many things. What we are overexposed to, we become resistant to. We don't acknowledge it. These plants, overexposed to glyphosate, the herbicide, became resistant to it. So now they have to spray more and more. Let me throw some numbers at you. So, for instance, between 1999 and 2015, the EPA approved a doubling. This is between 1999 to 2015, a doubling of the tolerable residue of glyphosate on soybean grain. Doubling. That sounds bad enough. A 49-fold increase on corn grain. 49-fold more residue was allowable on corn grain. And shockingly, since 1993, the agency has approved a 2,000-fold increase in the tolerable level of glyphosate residues on alfalfa grown that is fed to animals, that goes to animal feed. 2,000-fold increase. The agency also increased the allowable level of glyphosate for wheat. It's up 5-fold between 2012 and 2015. That's only 3 years. So when they test for glyphosate, it's turned up in honey, soy, infant formula, even in breast milk. That's concerning. So I repeat myself that this situation is still in its infancy, and we can argue the pros and cons, but the bottom line is, if there's a problem, this thing has grown too fast. Whether there was the intention or not, but because the plants are so resistant to the glyphosate, the EPA is just allowing incredible is not the word, insane, that's a much better word. They get a lot of political and industrial pressure to increase the allowable residue, and 49-fold increase on corn. The one that bothers me the most, though, is the 2,000-fold increase in the tolerable level of glyphosate on the animal feed. If the animals are being overexposed to this, and then we want to drink the meat, drink the milk, eat the meat, have the eggs. Are you serious? Crazy, right? So again, the glyphosate, the herbicides, which led to the introduction of GMO, genetically modified organisms, so that they could be resistant to the herbicide and that therefore they could keep spraying and spraying. You've got money behind that tries to say that GMO food is just the same and just as healthy as the regular stuff. They've spent a lot of money on that. But then again, why did Monsanto have to spend $11 billion in that lawsuit about non-Hodgkin's lymphoma? Anyway, I digress. GMO is a whole different thing. But genetic editing is what I wanted to talk to you about today. So what I'm talking about genetic editing here is, so with GMO, they'll go in there and they'll alter the DNA of the plant. So they'll add like a foreign something to the DNA. So there's something else being put into that DNA. But with genetic editing, what they do is they go in, and they snip part of the protein chain that's already there. They snip that part out. So the argument they're saying is that the plant wasn't artificially modified because they didn't add anything to it. What they did, they just took something out. Do you agree with that argument? Or would you say that plant has still been altered? They didn't add anything foreign to the DNA, but they went in and snipped part of the pattern out. They genetically edited the plant, and now it's animals as well on this. They say that is still natural. Do you agree, or do you think that it is indeed still altered? And that's the question. So it's basically a workaround. So what it is, so they use these gene editing tools to make very precise DNA changes within the organism's own genome. So no foreign DNA is added. And in many countries, it's not legally classified as GMO because they're saying it's natural. When did this start? I guess maybe it started in the 1980s, but it was adapted. The technology was adapted in about the early 2010, something like that. And the first edited foods to hit the shelves were the non-browning mushrooms, and they were first introduced in 2016. So how's it being used? So countries like the United States, Japan, Brazil do not require GMO labeling if gene editing leaves no foreign DNA. So it does not have to be labeled GMO. The label does not have to say it is being altered. In some of the strict GMO ban countries, there's been political pressure in growing this gene editing as being exempt from GMO rules. And they're saying this, so the pressure is they're saying it's natural and it's just a faster way of doing what they would do with conventional breeding patterns. So the farmers have for years, they've bred animals different ways, trying to get the master breed, and they've changed plants and seed, trying to get a master seed. And what they're saying is hey, this is just the same thing. It's just a faster way of doing it. And again, do you agree or do you not? So what are the examples that we have now of gene edited food? So we have tomatoes, we have soybeans, don't even get me started on soy. We have wheat, corn, potatoes, those bruise-resistant potatoes. We have rice, drought tolerant, so they get high yields. They're not non-browning mushrooms. Bananas that are resistant to the Panama disease, but also the animals, cattle, heat tolerant, slick coat, so they can adapt to climates. Pigs that are resistant to that very costly swine disease. Salmon, just like GMO, but salmon, so they're disease resistant and they grow faster. And even sheep and goats, again, to be disease resistant. So who is telling us that this is all safe? The USDA exempts many gene-edited crops from the GMO regulation. The FDA reviews safety on a voluntary basis for most foods. You've got in the EU, they still treat gene editing as GMO for now, but they are reviewing it. And the World Health Organization generally recognizes that gene editing is low risk. How big is that? They generally recognize that gene editing is low risk. That is not taking a stance. Who's benefiting from it? So we have Corteva, which is big in this. Bayer Monsanto, shocker. They're using gene editing and seed traits for their herbicide tolerance. And then there's a bunch of others, but there's a lot of big names with a lot of money being spent on this. So the very real concern here is even without foreign DNA, gene-edited food is still genetically altered. I think we can all agree with that. So altered DNA can change the shape and chemistry of the proteins. The immune system recognizes proteins. It doesn't recognize a production method. It recognizes proteins. And they've just changed the shape and chemistry of the protein. It doesn't look the same. This new shaped protein could be treated like a foreign invader, potentially triggering an allergic or inflammatory response. And again, the absence of this on a label means that the consumers can't connect maybe new symptoms you're having from eating a food with the source because it is not shown on the label. If we want to look around the world, and how does the world look at GMO and now genetic editing? So we've talked about the United States. Genetically modified, widely grown and sold. Your corn, your soy, your canola, your sugar beets, etc. 90% of the crops in some cases. Massive. Soy, the money being made on that is 3 times the gross of the NFL. So you can imagine how much money that is. Labeling. So in the US, only the foods containing detectable modified DNA have to be labeled. And even then, they do not have to say genetically modified. They'll say something like bioengineered or something like that. So it's trickery. So yes, definitely look for bioengineered on your food. And if the food says organic, it might have something GMO in it. If it says 100% organic, you are in the clear. The gene-edited foods do not have to be labeled. Consumer awareness is low because the laws allow most GMO and all gene-edited foods to be sold without an obvious identification. Even the GMO. Sometimes they'll be like, as long as you put like a QR code, something to scan. So what? So now we have to look, if it's not labeled, we have to scan the product. And once we scan it, it says that it's GMO. The duty lies on us, really. Or if it's a fresh produce, they have to have it labeled. And again, it doesn't have to say GMO, just bioengineered, or a scan card or a scan code close by. Trickery. It's all trickery. And again, gene edited, they don't have to put anything on the label at all. Now, before I go on, again, it just comes back to my point that gene editing is very new. I'm like, it's really got going throughout 2020. That was only 5 years ago. Only 5 years ago. You've seen what's happened with GMO. Now they've got this little workaround going on, and only 5 years, and you don't know it, that it's not on the label. All right, to continue. No, Europe. What is Europe? They are very strict. There's only one GMO crop approved for cultivation, and it's called MON 810 corn. And even a lot of the countries in Europe ban even that. But that's the only one. Labeling, mandatory for any food containing GMO to label it as GMO. In Europe, they look at things differently. So what they do, they call it the precautionary principle. And what that means is in Europe, they have to prove safety. They have to prove the product is safety. In America, they have to prove harm. Big difference. So in America, you have to prove that the product did you harm. In Europe, the duty is on the producers. They have to prove that their product is safe. Very big difference. Now, England, I'm a bit disappointed with because since Brexit, when the United Kingdom left Europe, now they've broken away from the European rules, and that was in 2023. Now they're allowing certain gene-edited plants and animals without treating them as GMO. So they too this is the start of the gene-edited but not GMO model in Europe, so they're not labeling it. If we go farther afield, Japan, all GMO requires labeling. Gene-edited foods without any foreign DNA do not require labeling. They're the ones that started with the tomatoes back in 2021, only 4 years ago. China recently approved GMO soy and corn for domestic farming. You believe that? They're behind us. But they do still require GMO labeling. Brazil and Argentina, they're right up there with America. In fact, Brazil and Argentina is where we get most of our soy from. So they really a high adoption of genetically modified crops, just like the US. The regulation is similar to the US, so gene-edited crops can bypass GMO rules if they contain no foreign DNA. So you make your mind up. How do you feel about that? Again, going back to my example of cigarettes. The monster grew before we realized or you can go to the opioid epidemic. The monster grew and we realized there was a problem. The toothpaste was out the tube. The monster had grown so big. How do we reverse that? With the opioid epidemic and of course with cigarettes, the harm was so great. We had to turn those ships around, but it took decades and cost, millions of lives. Millions of lives from people who were hoodwinked because when the danger was known, it was not passed on to the consumer. Destroyed lives, destroyed families, and continues to do. What if GMO and what if gene editing is the same thing? This is all in its infancy. Even GMO, which again is banned in Europe, is a relative child when we look at food processing. And gene editing is like a newborn, just getting going. So right now, all we can do is work with the 100% organic, not just organic. It has to say 100% organic, because I don't think anybody else is going to come and save us from this. I don't think anybody else is going to force labeling on the gene edited food, but I would like to be proved wrong on that. And if indeed our bodies are reacting by having an immune response to foods that the body just doesn't recognize the protein pattern. So now you have an immune response, and the immune response is continually being triggered. So it's continually fighting for you. And now you've got like a cellular level of exhaustion going on because of this chronic low-grade inflammation and all the diseases that go with that. And I'm going to do a podcast on the rise of autoimmune diseases, because that's an interesting link as well. But just something to ponder, and something that is real and relevant and happening right now, unbeknownst to most of us. Please try and stick with locally raised animals if you can. Know where they come from, know what they were fed, for more reason, definitely for your food, but also for the animals. Going back to that 2,000-fold increase in the glyphosate residue that is allowed on animal feed, so poisoning the animals. There's always that price point, that dollar amount difference between 100% organic food, and I think that's one of the biggest sadnesses of it, because you have, like in the cities, areas where they just don't have access to fresh food of any type, let alone organic. And this is just another way to divide society, huh? Because yet again, we're just running after the dollar, and there's a lot of, do not be hoodwinked here. There's a lot of money being made here. Support your local farmer. Go 100% organic. Read your labels, but just know that right now there's some trickery that's going on, and it's not showing up on your labels. GMO and just genetic editing, that just frustrates me. Anyway, that's it for now. So don't forget that the Mastering Midlife program is coming up September 14th. Run for 5 weeks. There'll be 11 live coaching programs. You can buy the program whenever you want. There's always a self-study, and you can couple it with privates with me if you want. But the group coaching program is definitely a really engaged, fun way of doing it. And the next podcast I'm going to do is on the liver and body composition. I do hope you enjoyed this episode of Midlife Mayhem. Be sure to subscribe, and be sure to tell your friends about this wonderful podcast. If you would like more of me, then on social, it's simple, just my name @JoanneLeeCornish. Also my website, theshrinkshop.com, where you can see all my coaching programs. There are many, many ways we can work together. Obviously, I do private one-on-one coaching. I do all my programs are in a self-study form, and all my programs are run as a live program at least once a year. I try and do twice, but it usually ends up being once. I have mindset program. I have my awesome 5-day peak week shred that people love. I have the signature weight loss program. I have Tight 28, which is advanced weight loss. I have muscle mastery, and I have mastering midlife. So 6 programs that offer a progression to fully understand the body composition through the ages. If you have questions, if you're kind of wondering how I can help you, then simply shoot me an email at jo@theshrinkshop.com. Tell me what's going on, and I'll get back to you and let you know the way I can help. Okay, that's it for now.